Most people experience a midlife crisis in their early 40s and 50s, by Brittany Bates. What exactly is a midlife crisis? A midlife crisis is defined as a time in our lives, normally between the ages of 40 and 60, that we question our ways of living and make a drastic change. Did people agree or disagree with this myth? When I asked 5 people if they believed that this was a myth or not, this is what they answered. 4 to 5 people said they thought that this myth was true, that people do have midlife crises in their 40s through 60s, and 1 out of 5 said it wasn't true. The reason people thought this myth was true is because their parents or people they know have gone through a midlife crisis, or what they think is a midlife crisis. Prevalence of myths from articles and websites. There's 2 websites that I found on midlife crisis. One's called the midlifeclub.com, which includes information about his or her midlife crisis, and a chat room where you can talk to people about midlife crisis or if someone else is going through it and what you do to cope with it. The other website is Midlife Crisis Marriage Advocate. It has 3 steps to survive your spouse's midlife crisis. 1 is midlife crisis, which is to identify what it is and what the problem is. 2 is paving the way in mirror work to work with your spouse to try and fix what is going on. And part 3 is standing actions, just taking action and helping that person come over that midlife crisis. There's a couple magazine articles that I found. One is in the Atlantic. It's called The Real Roots of Midlife Crisis. The 2 is in the Huffington Post, 7 Signs You Might Be Facing a Midlife Crisis, and also in the Chicago Tribune, It's a Crisis Time for Boomers. Prevalence of the myth from books and movies. Some books about midlife crisis include Intimacy, Tropic of Cancer, Moby Dick, Women with Men, Bonfire of the Vanities, American Beauty, The Iceman Myth, which there's actually a lot more books as well as a lot more movies than is listed in here. Some movies are Enough Said, It's Complicated, Las Vegas, City Slickers, Young Adults, The Incredibles, and Wild Hogs. Where exactly does midlife crisis come from? The idea of a midlife crisis comes from Dante's poem called Divine Comedy. There's a line in there that kind of states back to this is a midlife crisis, but it doesn't exactly say those words. And then Eliot actually made the word known in 1965. He describes it as an attempt to remain young. It's also described as a transition people make when reaching the ages of 40 to 60. Evidence for the myth. There's a couple theories that I found. One is that midlife crisis comes from people who follow Sigmund Freud, which it explained from Freud is where people are driven by their thought or fear of death to do certain things. The next one is Jungian theory, which midlife crisis is based on our individualism and finding ourselves. And then there's Carl Jung, who midlife crisis is described as a way of thinking, sensation, feeling, kind of causing us confusion as into what to do next in life. And then there's Erik Erikson. His midlife crisis is a stage of creating a better future for younger generations, which is to why there's a lot of later inventions that are made, such as like the iPhone Steve Jobs made kind of late in life, as to why people in their 20s are not making inventions. Then there's stagnation, which is you can't help your other people unless you help yourself first, so you need to help yourself before helping other people. And then there's the gene midlife crisis, which you can no longer have kids with your spouse, so you go after younger women or men who can still have kids. Evidence against the myth. There's a couple examples from the book. One was done by Daniel Schreck. His study was on 1,500 Chinese married adults between the ages of 30 and 60, so right as they're coming into that midlife crisis age and when they're about to be done with their midlife crisis. He failed to find any high levels of dissatisfaction in these couples. They were happy, being married, who they were with, nothing had changed for them. Another study was done of 7,000 men and women between the ages of 25 and 74, so a wider range. But out of these people, only about 3,000 were interviewed while they were in their midlife crisis period. The people between the 40s and 60s said they felt in control of their life. They weren't having a midlife crisis. They didn't feel the urge to change who they were and what they were doing. Out of all these studies, only 10 to 26% of people had admitted to having a midlife crisis. The percentage could be less because some of the scientists conduct the studies. Their midlife crisis could be defined in a different way. They might not be defining it in the same exact way. Between the ages of 40 and 60, people become more financially stable and have kids and leave home. Therefore, people are able to purchase and go do things that they haven't been able to at a young age because they have kids and they have to support those kids. But now that it's just themselves, they're able to do what they want to do instead of taking care of their kids anymore. My final thoughts on the subject. In my opinion, I believe, yes, people think midlife crisis is a real thing, but in reality, it's really not. Older people are more financially stable. They're able to buy that dream car that they've always wanted since they were younger. They're able to start a hobby now that their kids are out of the house and that they have this money. So it's just a normal thing to happen during that period. It's not technically a midlife crisis. It's being able to do what you want with your money now. I do believe that gene midlife crisis is a thing, which is when a man can no longer have kids with his wife and he feels as if he needs to produce more kids to be manly. So he leaves his wife for a younger woman who can still have kids. I believe that is a thing, but I don't think that technically is what a midlife crisis is to me. So therefore, my myth could both be busted and confirmed. But in my opinion, I really think it's busted. That a midlife crisis is not a thing. It's just people are more financially stable, that they're able to spend the money that they have then, and they're able to go on vacation and do what they want. So it's technically busted.